"Sir, put your hands where I can see them, now!" The TSA agent's voice echoed through Terminal C as passengers turned to stare. Robert Mitchell, 76 years old, slowly raised his weathered hands, his carry-on bag still in his grip. His calm, gray eyes showed no panic, no fear, just the kind of quiet patience that comes from facing far worse threats than an aggressive security guard. What nobody in that airport knew was that in exactly 11 minutes, FBI Director Katherine Wells would arrive with a full security detail, demanding to know who dared to detain one of America's most decorated intelligence operatives. Robert Mitchell lived a quiet life in Boulder, Colorado, a small house with a garden, morning coffee on the porch, neighbors who waved but never asked too many questions. He preferred it that way. At 76, his hair had gone completely silver, his face marked by lines that told stories he'd never share at dinner parties. Not that he attended many dinner parties. People who saw him at the grocery store or the post office saw what they expected to see, another retired man filling his days with errands and crossword puzzles. They didn't see the 3 decades he spent in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. They didn't see the operations in Beirut, the networks he built in Eastern Europe, the terrorist cells he dismantled before they could strike. They didn't see the scars, physical and otherwise, that came with a career in the Central Intelligence Agency. Robert had been retired for 8 years. The agency gave him a plaque, a handshake, and a pension. They also gave him something else, a new identity, stripped of any public recognition. That was the deal. You serve in the shadows, you retire in the shadows. No book deals, no interviews, no recognition. Just a quiet life and the knowledge that you'd made a difference, even if nobody would ever know. And Robert was fine with that. He'd made peace with anonymity until today. Denver International Airport was unusually crowded for a Tuesday morning. Robert stood in the security line at Terminal C, his small carry-on bag at his feet. He was flying to Washington, D.C. for a private ceremony, a closed-door gathering of former intelligence officers being honored by the current CIA director. It wasn't public. It would never make the news, but it mattered to the people who understood what they'd sacrificed. The line moved slowly. Robert didn't mind. Patience had been drilled into him during his first year at the farm, the CIA's training facility. Wait. Observe. Never rush. Never show frustration. Ahead of him, a young mother struggled with a stroller and 2 screaming toddlers. Behind him, a businessman in an expensive suit tapped impatiently on his phone. Robert simply stood, hands in his pockets, watching the organized chaos of airport security. When his turn came, he placed his bag on the conveyor belt, removed his jacket, and walked through the metal detector. Beep. The sound was sharp and immediate. The TSA agent, a young man, maybe 24, with a buzz cut and a name tag that read Derek Walsh, motioned him back. "Sir, step back and go through again." Robert complied. He walked back through the detector. Beep. Derek frowned. "Do you have anything metal on you? Keys, belt, watch?" Robert checked his pockets. Empty. He'd already removed his belt and watch. "No, nothing." "Go through one more time." Beep. Derek's frown deepened. He motioned to another agent, a woman in her 30s with short dark hair and a supervisor badge. Her name tag read, Lisa Brennan. "We've got a repeat alert," Derek said, pointing at Robert. Lisa walked over, her expression all business. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside." Robert moved to the side, calm and compliant. Other passengers glanced over, curious. A few pulled out their phones. "Do you have any metal implants? Pacemaker? Artificial joints?" Lisa asked. "No," Robert said simply. Derek leaned in and whispered something to Lisa. She nodded, then turned back to Robert. "Sir, we're going to need to conduct a full search. Please follow me." Robert followed them to a screening area cordoned off by portable dividers. 2 more TSA agents appeared, flanking him on either side. The small crowd of waiting passengers had grown. Phones were raised, recording. "Sir, I need you to place your bag on the table and empty your pockets," Lisa instructed. Robert set his bag down and turned out his pockets. A wallet, a small leather-bound notebook, a pen. That was it. Derek opened the notebook and flipped through the pages. It was filled with neat handwriting, notes, observations, fragments of thoughts. Nothing classified, nothing incriminating. Just the quiet musings of a man who'd spent his life thinking 3 steps ahead. "What is this?" Derek asked, holding up the notebook as if it were evidence. "Personal journal," Robert said evenly. "Why do you need a journal on a plane?" "Why wouldn't I?" Derek didn't like the answer. He set the notebook down and moved to the bag, unzipping it with unnecessary force. Inside, 2 shirts, a pair of pants, a toothbrush, reading glasses, and a paperback novel. "Where are you flying to?" Lisa asked. "Washington, D.C. "Purpose of your trip?" "Personal. Can you be more specific?" Robert paused. The ceremony was classified. He couldn't explain it. Not here, not to them. "It's a private gathering, retired colleagues." Lisa exchanged a glance with Derek. Robert could see the suspicion forming. In their minds, he wasn't a traveler. He was a problem to be solved. "Sir, we're going to need to do a full pat-down," Derek said, stepping forward. Robert raised his hand slightly, palms open. "Go ahead." The pat-down was thorough, more thorough than necessary. Derek's hands moved over Robert's shoulders, down his arms, along his sides, around his waist, down his legs. It was clinical, invasive, and designed to intimidate. Robert had been through worse. He'd been strip-searched by hostile intelligence services, held in interrogation rooms for hours, threatened with violence in places where no one would ever find his body. A TSA pat-down in a public airport was nothing, but the humiliation was different. This wasn't an enemy. This was home. "He's clean," Derek finally said, stepping back. Lisa wasn't satisfied. She picked up the notebook again, flipping through it more carefully this time. "Sir, what kind of work did you used to do?" "Consulting," Robert said. It was the cover story he'd used for years, vague enough to be meaningless. "What kind of consulting?" "Risk assessment, international security." Derek snorted. "Security? You look more like a retired teacher." A few passengers chuckled. Robert said nothing. Lisa set the notebook down and leaned closer. "Sir, you're showing signs of confusion. Are you traveling alone? Is there someone we can call?" Robert's jaw tightened just slightly. "I'm not confused. You couldn't answer basic questions about your trip. You're carrying a journal with unstructured notes. You seem disoriented." "I assure you I'm not." But Lisa had already made up her mind. She pulled out her radio. "I need a supervisor at Checkpoint C, possible elderly passenger in distress." Robert closed his eyes for a moment. He'd walked away from firefights, escaped ambushes, survived situations that would have broken most men. And now, at 76, he was being treated like a lost child at an airport. Across the terminal, near gate C-14, a woman in a dark suit stood watching the commotion. She was tall, sharp-featured, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name was Katherine Wells, and she was the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She'd arrived early for a classified meeting in D.C., and she'd just been passing through security when she saw the crowd gathering around Checkpoint C. Curiosity and a lifetime of investigative instincts made her walk closer. When she saw the man at the center of the commotion, she stopped. Silver hair, calm posture, weathered face, Robert Mitchell. Katherine had worked with Robert twice during her years at the Bureau, once in 2003 coordinating a joint operation in Eastern Europe, once in 2009 tracking a weapons smuggling ring in South America. Both times, Robert had been the CIA's lead operative. Both times, he'd been brilliant. She hadn't seen him in years, but she'd never forget his face. And now, she watched as TSA agents surrounded him, treating him like a suspect. Katherine's expression darkened. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "This is Director Wells. I need a security detail at Denver International Terminal C immediately, and I need the TSA supervisor in charge of Checkpoint C on the line. Now." Back at the checkpoint, Lisa's supervisor, a middle-aged man named Greg Palmer, had arrived. He stood with his arms crossed, listening as Lisa explained the situation. "Sir, we've got an elderly passenger showing signs of confusion. He couldn't clearly explain his travel purpose, and he's carrying unstructured notes. I recommend we hold him for a medical evaluation." Greg looked at Robert. "Sir, what's your name?" "Robert Mitchell." "Mr. Mitchell, do you understand where you are?" Robert's patience was wearing thin, but his voice stayed calm. "I'm at Denver International Airport, Terminal C, being detained for no legal reason." We're not detaining you. We're concerned for your safety. I don't need your concern. I need to board my flight. Greg shook his head. I'm afraid that's not possible until we've determined you're fit to travel. Behind them, passengers whispered. Cameras recorded. The situation was escalating. And then, the sound. Footsteps, fast, purposeful, echoing across the terminal floor. A woman's voice, sharp and commanding. Everyone stepped back, now. The TSA agents turned. Katherine Wells strode toward them, flanked by 4 FBI agents in dark suits. Her badge was already out, held high. I'm FBI Director Katherine Wells. Who's in charge here? Greg stepped forward, confused. I am. Greg Palmer, TSA Supervisor. Ma'am, what's this about? Katherine's eyes locked on Robert. For a brief moment, their gazes met. Robert's expression didn't change, but something passed between them. Recognition, respect, relief. Katherine turned back to Greg. You've detained this man? We were conducting a routine security check. Routine? Katherine's voice cut like a blade. You surrounded him, searched him publicly, questioned his mental capacity, and threatened to prevent him from traveling. Does that sound routine to you? Greg hesitated. Ma'am, we were following protocol. What protocol allows you to humiliate a 76-year-old man without cause? Lisa stepped forward. Director Wells, with respect, we had reason to believe. You had reason to believe what? That an elderly man with a notebook and a carry-on bag was a threat? Derek, emboldened by nervous energy, spoke up. He was acting suspicious. He couldn't explain his trip clearly. Katherine turned her gaze on him. It was the kind of look that could freeze blood. Agent Walsh, is it? She read his name tag. Let me explain something to you. The man you just detained, Robert Mitchell, spent 30 years serving this country in ways you will never fully understand. He operated in hostile territories, dismantled terrorist networks, and saved countless American lives. He holds more commendations than you have years of life. And you just treated him like a criminal. The terminal had gone silent. Every eye was on Katherine. Greg's face had gone pale. Ma'am, we didn't know. That's the problem. You didn't know. You saw an older man and assumed incompetence. You saw someone who didn't fit your narrow idea of normal, and you decided he was a problem. She stepped closer to Robert. Mr. Mitchell, are you all right? Robert nodded. I'm fine, Director. I apologize on behalf of everyone here. This never have happened. Katherine turned back to the TSA team. Mr. Palmer, I want a full report on this incident on my desk by tomorrow morning. Every agent involved will undergo retraining on proper conduct and respect for travelers, especially elderly and veteran passengers. Greg nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Katherine gestured to Robert. Come with me. You'll board your flight from the priority lane. As they walked away, the crowd parted. Some passengers clapped. Others recorded the moment, already uploading it to social media. Derek stood frozen, his face flushed with shame. Lisa stared at the ground. Greg pulled out his radio, already dreading the phone call he'd have to make to his regional director. In the priority boarding lounge, Katherine sat across from Robert. She handed him a bottle of water. How have you been, Robert? Quiet, until today. Katherine smiled faintly. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Not your fault. Still, it shouldn't have happened. Robert took a sip of water. They were just doing their job. No, they were abusing their authority. There's a difference. Robert didn't argue. He knew she was right. Katherine leaned back. You're heading to the ceremony in D.C.? That's the plan. I'll be there too. Langley invited a few of us from the bureau. Good. It'll be nice to see familiar faces. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Katherine spoke again, her voice quieter. You know, Robert, people like you and me, we spent our lives in the shadows. We did the work no one would ever see, made sacrifices no one would ever know about. And when we're done, we fade away. That's the deal. I know. But that doesn't mean you deserve to be treated like you don't matter. Robert met her eyes. I know that too. Katherine stood. Your flight board's in 20 minutes. I made sure they'll treat you with the respect you've earned. Thank you, Katherine. She nodded and walked toward the exit, but before she left, she turned back. For what it's worth, Robert, the work you did mattered. It still matters. Don't let anyone make you forget that. Robert watched her leave. Then he stood, picked up his bag, and walked toward the gate. Behind him, in Terminal C, Greg Palmer was already on the phone with TSA headquarters, explaining what had happened. Derek Walsh sat in the break room, staring at his hands. Lisa Brennan replayed the encounter in her mind, wondering how she'd missed the signs. And across the country, on social media, a video was going viral. FBI director confronts TSA agents after they humiliate elderly veteran at airport. The comments poured in. This is what respect looks like. We owe everything to people like him. Those TSA agents should be ashamed. By the time Robert's plane took off, the story had been picked up by news outlets. By the time he landed in Washington, it was national news. But Robert didn't see any of it. He sat in his seat looking out the window at the EP clouds below, thinking about the ceremony ahead, thinking about the men and women he'd served with, thinking about the quiet life he'd returned to when it was all over. And for the first time in a long time, he felt seen. Not as a threat, not as a problem, not as someone to be pitied, but as someone who had mattered, and still did. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe so you never miss a powerful story about the heroes among us.